Chapter 3. The North Ridge neighborhood was normally one of the safest, quietest, and most beautiful parts of the city. Spacious golden homes with meticulously groomed lawns sat in silent darkness as the neighborhood slept. The only sound was the gentle whisper of the creek that meandered through the community. The creek was one of the main reasons Adam had chosen this neighborhood. Over the years, this stream had become his companion. He often came to it when he was troubled. He would sit, sometimes for hours, watching the ever-changing currents, or a standing wave that would slowly build and every few minutes collapse on itself. The cross-currents, eddies, wave trains, hydraulics, pour-overs, the rich complexities combining to make a simple stream captivated his mind. Many times he had followed the stream out of the city, tracking it for miles in hopes it would take him to the pond that brought him into this world. Adam's many excursions south of the orchard in search of the pond always had the same result. He returned to the city empty, frustrated, and lonely. But while he was away from the city, away from the gold, his thinking was always clearer. At least his thoughts about his life in this world. The memories of his home and family had faded long ago. Like a piece of ice in his hands, the tighter he attempted to grip them, the more they slipped away. His only connection to his arrival in this world were the maps he created in his searches. They were the product of years of work meticulously surveying the area south of the city, section by section. He hoped one day he might have a chance to show them to the great ones. Perhaps they would be able to help him find the pond. The maps were his most prized possession, and he kept them carefully hidden in his house. Just a block south of the creek, within his lavishly furnished bedroom, Adam had just drifted off to sleep when the piercing tone of the city siren jolted him awake. Again? He rose quickly from his bed, dressed, grabbed a jacket, and hurried out into the street. It was the third siren that had sounded in as many days. The street rapidly filled with Adam's neighbors, including his old friend George. "Which building is it this time?" George asked. George shook his gray head. "No idea. Just heard the siren, same as you." Adam thought again about how George's tendency toward chatter had dissipated over the years. The buzz of speculation permeated the nervous crowd as everyone scanned the surrounding buildings. "There!" a woman shouted, pointing to the north. Adam looked just in time to see a giant dust cloud rising up in the place where a beautiful golden high-rise had stood moments earlier. Most of the neighbors remained at their homes to protect them from the looters. Adam and a few others ran towards the collapsed structure. The siren gave pretty good warning this time, he thought. Hopefully most of the people made it out. As he ran, Adam glanced toward the city gate, as he had so many times over the years. He felt a tinge of sadness, remembering the day he had first entered the city, so determined not to become trapped here. He shook his head. Adam arrived at what had become a familiar scene. Survivors searching for loved ones and tending to the wounded, others wandering around in a daze, and many dead. Adam joined some men who were working to move a large beam to search the area underneath. "There's someone down there," one of the men said. "I can hear her. We have to move this beam." The men tried to move it, but it didn't budge. Adam quickly gathered some long pieces of timber and a couple of steel rods and gave one to each man. "Wedge your lever under here," he said. "We'll use this log as a fulcrum and pry it off." The technique proved effective, and soon the beam was up out of the way. The group quickly removed the remaining layers of debris until they could see the woman. She was pinned under 3 solid gold pillars. 2 of the men stepped back. A third man attempted to push the top pillar, but the moment his hands came in contact with the gold, he winced and quickly pulled his hands back. "We can't save her," one of the men said, and walked away. One by one, the rest followed until only Adam remained. "I won't leave you," he assured her. He used whatever tools he could, but even when something in his hand touched the gold, the pain was excruciating. Adam knew it would be weeks before the burning in his hands would subside, and the longer he did this, the worse it would be. Still, he couldn't leave the woman. It was another hour before he finally freed her. "Can you stand?" he asked. The woman sobbed. "I can't move my legs." Bursts of pain shot through his hands and arms as Adam slid one arm under her back and another under her knees, struggling to his feet, and then carried her to a triage staging area. The woman was dark-complected with black hair and gray eyes. Holding her made Adam forget his pain and filled him with desire for her. Desire he knew he had to fight back. He could tell from her dress and jewelry that she was from a much higher class than he. Adam had done well for himself working with George in his shoe shop, and due to some shrewd investments had amassed a larger stockpile of gold than most in this wealthy neighborhood. Still, he knew he could never have a woman like her. Adam set her gently on one of the cots and pulled one of the nurses aside. "Is she going to be okay?" "She has severe bruising on her legs," she replied. "We'll know more after the doctor examines her." Adam stepped back to the cot. "I think you're going to be just fine," he said. She reached up and took hold of his arm. "I've never seen anyone do what you did," she said. "I can't tell you how grateful I am. How are your hands?" "Oh, they'll be fine," he said, turning his palms up to look at them and then quickly closing them to hide the burns. "I was happy to help." "My name is Margaret," she said. "I'm Adam." Adam wanted to say something else, but his mind went blank. He had never spoken to a woman like this before. Part of him felt he had no business talking to her at all, but another part of him had the feeling that she wanted to talk to him. Was that just hopeful imagination, or... "The doctor will see her now," said an attendant. He and another man lifted the cot and carried it to the examination tent. Adam watched as they disappeared into the tent, feeling as though something had been torn from him. He sat in the waiting area, debating about whether to return to the rescue effort or stay and make sure the woman was okay. But if he were still here when she came out, would she think he was lingering in hopes of getting a reward? Would the doctor even be willing to report her condition to someone like him, someone from a class so clearly beneath hers? Just as Adam stood to leave, a nurse caught his arm. "She's asking for you. You're the one who brought Miss Stedman in, right?" "Miss Stedman? Margaret Stedman. The woman with all the jewelry? The doctor won't let anyone back there now, but she said she wants to see you again." Adam tried to calm himself as he scribbled his address on a paper. She probably just wanted to thank him. He didn't dare allow his hopes to go beyond that. "This is where I live," he said, handing her the note. Adam returned to the work site and rejoined the group he had worked with, but with the burns on his hands, he couldn't do much. His thoughts kept going back to the woman. Then he thought of the others who weren't as fortunate. Hours ago, they were carrying on their lives, enjoying their wealth without a care in the world. Now they lay trapped in a mangled pile of twisted metal, bodies crushed, taking their final breaths alone in the darkness. Adam clenched his fists. "If they're so brilliant, why can't the prophets figure out what's causing these collapses?" he mumbled to himself. The man closest to him stood straight, looked around to see if anyone else heard, then back at Adam. "What did you say?" "Nothing," Adam said, continuing his work. The man persisted. "Were you questioning the great ones?" "I'm not questioning them. It's just..." He waved his arm toward the rubble. "All this suffering and death. It's getting worse. With all their knowledge of the properties of metals, why can't the great ones discover what's causing these collapses? Look!" Adam pushed his foot against a steel beam and it bent and snapped like a dead tree branch. "The metal is corroded. Every part of this building that was plated with gold is like this. Those beams over there that had no contact with the gold are as strong as ever. There's something..." The man dropped his tool, took a step toward Adam and said, "Don't be an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about." Adam had spent many hours over the years studying the writings. While their insights were fascinating, he found them unsatisfying because they were mostly confined to the city and the orchard. He found a few references to the pond, but no clues on its location, and nothing at all about the high country or the world he had come from or how he might return. He didn't fault them for that, but this is a problem in the city they built. They should know why this is happening. "Can't you see what's right in front of your face?" Adam said. "Look around. Obviously, something's wrong." "Sabotage," the man said. "The mountain people send their kids here, and they sneak into the buildings and do something to them. I don't know how they're doing it, but I know it's them. And if you can't see that, you are a fool." "Maybe I am," Adam said, and he turned to go home. He needed to think. Normally, Adam enjoyed a walk at night along the creek that led to his neighborhood, but this time his mind was in turmoil. He knew something was wrong with the gold, but whenever he tried to think it through, a fog darkened his mind. Why couldn't he think? Suddenly a voice sounded in his head, a voice he hadn't thought of in many years. It was the pleading shout of the little girl. don't touch the gold." Why had she said that? Did she know of some plan of sabotage even then? Or was it something else? Adam was eager to get home and put some gold on his burns. He could still remember the first time he ever touched gold. His first week working for George, Adam caught his knee on the corner of a bench, opening a painful laceration. George pulled one of the gold bands from his wrist and presented it to Adam as a gift. The moment George placed it in Adam's hand, a thrill coursed through his whole body. The intensity of the pleasure startled Adam. "Touch it to your knee," George advised. Adam obeyed. The elimination of pain was immediate, and after a few minutes of contact with the band, the wound was closed and was almost completely healed. "When I first met you, you wouldn't even let me touch your bands," Adam said. "And now you give me one as a gift?" George removed the other band to present it to Adam. "The healing properties only work if it's your own gold," he explained. "Touching someone else's gold has the opposite effect. It will burn your skin. Take these and keep them with you." Over the years, Adam had accumulated a large stockpile of gold, but none of the pieces were as dear to him as the bands, which he kept as a symbol of George's friendship. Adam now understood why George preferred bands over gold worn some other way. Though they looked like handcuffs, they were really the opposite. Having them on his wrists made them easy to apply to an injury while leaving the hands free. Still, Adam didn't like wearing them. He kept them hidden in his home. Their value to him as a gift from George was far beyond their healing value or monetary value. This night, however, he wished he had brought them. "Don't touch the gold." Why did she say that? Was she warning me not to touch other people's gold? When he came to the street that led away from the creek to his house, he paused. His burning muscles and sore feet screamed for rest, and he knew he could do permanent damage to his hands if he didn't get some gold on them soon. But the peaceful gurgling of the creek soothed his soul. He didn't want to leave it. He enjoyed the creek even more on the outside of the wall, where it was larger, and the steeper gradient caused rapids. Adam began walking again, past his street, following the creek downstream. He needed to get outside this city and think. When he came to the wall, he waded as far into the creek as he could without losing his footing, ducked under the water, let it carry him under the wall, and came up on the other side. He made his way back up the bank and continued walking beside the creek until he came to a large boulder that extended into the creek. Brushing away some pebbles, he took a seat on the boulder, watching the rhythms of the stream, and contemplated his life in the Golden City. He shivered in the cold, his clothes still wet from the creek. The chills made his thoughts drift back to that day at the pond. Awakening memories that had slept for many years, he recalled how this world once seemed half real to him. Why was that? Half real compared to what? This was the only world he'd ever really known, and yet something was wrong. His thoughts were interrupted by a sound. Approaching footsteps. Adam stood, but quickly realized he was cornered. If it was a wild animal, there was no escape other than jumping into the creek. It didn't sound like an animal, though. But what person would be out here at night? Unless... was he about to be accosted by the mountain people? Adam saw moonlight shine off of shiny black hair. It was a little girl.